Welcome to the Essentially You podcast, Dr. LaKeischa McMillan. How are you doing today, girl?
I am awesome. Thank you so much, Marissa, for having me here. I am just so excited to be part and be on your platform and be able to talk to the community today so we can dive into this subject, one of the subjects that I'm just so passionate about and love talking about all the time.
I completely resonate with this. When I read your topic, I was like, yes, 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 yes. We're talking about gliding, not slamming into perimenopause and menopause. And I always say it's like that beautiful, like, how do we create ease and grace during this transition? And that's exactly, I love the idea of gliding. I also like to say sauntering, you
Oh,
know?
I like that. I like
Yeah.
that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I know, we know, you and I both know that a lot of women find themselves or feel like they are slamming into these transitions. So I'm really excited for you to speak into this, what you've seen, how you are using your talents and your expertise to really serve women in this demographic. And then also, really what we can do to saunter and glide into this. But before we get into all of the nitty gritty, I would love for you to kind of share with us that defining moment for you when you decided that this was the women that you really wanted to serve.
Absolutely. So, my story is probably one of those that most people think about when they think about doctors in terms of becoming a doctor, from that point where I told my parents when I was like 12 years old, oh, I want to be a doctor. And I actually saw this video called The Miracle of Life and was like, oh, I want to do that. That's so awesome. And so, my parents helped guide me to during, certain pathways, like going to be part of a doctor's office, like shadowing a doctor from the age of 13 till I graduated from college, getting accepted into medical school early, like my junior year, and being able to, go through medical school and check off all these boxes and, seeming like you just had everything in order, right? And as somebody, standing on the outside looking in would be like, oh, she's just checking off these little boxes. Look at
Look
her.
at her
Okay.
handling business,
Right,
doing all the
right.
things. Yeah.
Exactly. And then life hits you, right?
Mhm.
There are times in our lives where we remember we have those defining moments. And for me, it was actually wrapped up in a 10-month period of time where, unfortunately, April 2nd, 2009, I lost my father to complications from a stroke. And then February 24th, 2010, my grandmother passes away from, complications of CHF, which was very sudden as well. And so coming from a very close and tight-knit family, my entire world, which was already like falling apart, literally, I felt like the rug was pulled out from underneath me. And so I'm like in free fall. I've become casual roommates with my husband, or cordial roommates is what I like to say with my husband. We had our firstborn son or child, which was our son. And I was just going through the motions and my body was starting to break down. Literally. I remember one night sitting on labor and delivery and my blood pressure was 160 over 110. And the nurses were like, do you need to go to the ER? I mean, like, seriously, like, what's going on? I had no energy. I was crawling into bed. I was waking up feeling what I call wired but tired, which means I was constantly feeling like I couldn't unwind. I couldn't shut this off. But I was exhausted. I was gaining weight. I didn't want to have sex with my husband. I started remembering some of the things my mother would say about how, going through menopause or the change, people talk about it in whisper tones, like,
Yeah.
change,
The change. So taboo.
right. And I'm like, but I'm only 40 years old. I'm only 41. I'm not going through the change. But then stepping back and literally saying to myself, you need to take time to take care of you and your family. You need to take time to heal. So stepping back, getting therapy, starting to heal and learning about what was going on in my body, I was able to then say, hey, I can give my genius to my ladies in a whole different way. And that's when I started focusing on perimenopause and menopause because of my own journey of how my body was starting to change. Yeah, it may have been, the impetus may have been a stressor, but this is the time in our lives where our bodies start changing and we don't know what's going on. We don't have anybody else to talk to. It's, our mothers weren't able to give us the talk 2.0. And so I've come to this point where I'm like, oh my goodness, we need to start having these conversations.
I agree 100%. And I think about all the things that you were going through, Dr. LaKeisha, the death of your dad and then your grandma, like those are big traumas,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
and then with your kids coming in, every mama knows, how not only how rewarding but that is, but how all encompassing that is.
Yes,
And
yes.
then you are a mama to everyone in your care, right? In labor and delivery, you're in that. So you talk about outpouring of service in every single direction, because I have a feeling that when your dad passed and your grandma passed, you were probably one of the rocks that was holding a lot of things together. And, combine that up with the shifts in hormones. And yeah, you've got a recipe for slamming into perimenopause and menopause.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I get my labs done around this time in my life because I'm like, okay, what's going on? I had no measurable testosterone. Okay.
Yeah.
Like my adrenals were shot. I mean, my thyroid was out of balance and dysfunctional. And this is what was starting to happen where I'm like, okay, how do I adjust this? How do I change this? What do I need to do? And that is where everything started evolving as well. So you're right. I talk about how at that point in time in my life, you talking about being mother to everyone and being that I remember my pager would go off. At the time, we were starting to shift over from pagers to being able to do these text messaging services on your phone through your phone, which was HIPAA compliant. So my text would go off and I would see it was from my answering service. And I would start getting upset, like, okay, what do you want with me now?
Mm-hmm.
Like who else wants a piece of me? And I knew that wasn't me. That was just not the way that I cared for my patients and for those in my life. And that was another indicator that, oh, something's going on. You really need to take care of yourself so that you can continue to take care of others.
I love that. And you probably, yeah, it's at that tipping point where everything and anything felt like I don't know if I can handle one more thing right now. I don't know if I can handle one more, because what's that? And as a practitioner, always when that pager goes off, that is someone needing something from you. And that's what it is. Either a nurse is needing something, the patient's needing something.
Yes.
That is what, there's no ever that text message goes off and someone's like, can I do something for you?
Exactly. You're right. You're right. It's always, okay, what do you want with my life now? Right?
Exactly. So I just wanted to just speak into that too. And I know so many women can relate, because every time you go into your inboxes, your emails are people, no one ever, when did someone send an email to you and it was like, what can I do for you today? It's like, hey, could you help me with this? Could I get something from you? And I think, especially when we're in that transition and we are dealing with such a bombardment of so much else that's coming on, I find for some women that perimenopause comes on even earlier. And it breaks my heart to see how often doctors dismiss women that they're not in perimenopause, although they have the textbook symptoms for them. And I think a lot of the stresses that we're dealing with, especially with this pandemic that so many of us have been in, so many women having to leave the workforce to go back home to care for their families and their parents, everybody that they're addressing, that we're starting to see it even coming on earlier, because a lot of these things are impacting our hormone system.
Absolutely. So I tell a lot of my patients, and this is the reason why I switched over to a concierge practice, is because I get to be able to take the time with you. And I'm not rushed. I'm able to really dive into what's going on in your life, because a lot of times it is the stress pathway that has hijacked everything else. And that is usually the domino that's fallen. That's the first thing. And then it's like, oh my gosh, then everything else goes out of whack. And you're trying to chase and figure out which one do we work on first. Mm-hmm. And so a lot, like you said, we're going into perimenopause probably even earlier, or even with more harsh symptoms, I would even dare say, because yeah, your hormones can start changing and fluctuating in your early 40s. And so that's why we say perimenopause can actually be this period of 10 years before you actually go into menopause. And that's like, when I say that to my ladies, they're just like, wait, what? What that means is that your body's changing. There are things that are going on that are impacting the systems. And so the systems are not working at full cylinders all the time. And this is where you get the tools to be able to impact them and be able to take back the reins. And so, yes, stressors, the way that we're living, this pandemic, what it has done to affect our lives has greatly impacted how women are going to, glide or slam into this phase of life.
I 100% agree with you, and absolutely right. I think all the labs I've ever run and on women, even in our late 30s, I see low testosterone levels. When I run the blood test, I start to see a decrease in T3 or T4, maybe not TSH yet, thyroid stimulating hormone, but I start to see those. And then I also start to see, I so rarely see a woman who's got robust progesterone levels where I'd like to see them, between like day 19, day 22, because that is also another hormone that really takes a hit. And it's no wonder we have these symptoms, and we're not necessarily connecting the dots of our symptoms to what could be early, like that early detection of perimenopause. And I think every time a woman tells you like, wait, what? Perimenopause, but then also you're like, do you not see your symptoms? I think we're not putting the pieces together yet. We're not associating these symptoms with this transition.
And that's exactly what I do. I help women see how this shows up on a daily basis. I'm like, okay, these are the labs. These are your symptoms. This is how it looks. This is how it looks on a daily basis. When your adrenals aren't working, when you have low testosterone, when you have low progesterone. So you're not crazy. This is how it looks. This is exactly how it looks. And so you are experiencing where you are having a physiological process that is imbalanced, and it's showing up this way.
I love that. I love that so much. I think that's so needed. Dr. LaKeisha, I want to roll back just a little bit, because I know you were in it, and you were feeling it. And when we look at the longevity of it all, when you look forward, you're like, I cannot see myself continuing to be in this, like in functioning and showing up for my partner, for my kids, for everybody, and even just for myself. And so what were some of the things that you were doing for you, that you felt like were kind of some of the biggest needle movers for you? Because let's be honest, everything you were doing was stacked, right? Time limited, And so I would just love for you to kind of and I know every woman's got to find their thing too.
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that was big for me is that I actually took a really big, hard look at how I was practicing medicine. And so that was one of the big shifts that I took. And that took a conversation with my partner. And that's what you have to decide when it's going to impact the family, when it's going to impact more than just, you. And, we decided that for my best health and for the health of our family, that I would step away from traditional medicine. Was it scary? Absolutely. It was scary. But we knew that this was going to be something that would really impact the way that my health would be able to move forward. So that was one of the big things I did. The second thing I did was I actually got some labs done. I worked with a wellness center here, and that's where I started looking into bioidentical hormones. And for me, that worked because I had absolutely no measurable testosterone. And I was like, no wonder I feel like I'm walking sideways. Now, is that for everybody? Not necessarily. And that's where you have to talk to your healthcare provider and see what will work for you. And so that's the path I decided to take. I also decided to take on, working on my adrenal health. And so there are various different ways that you can do that through either adaptogenic herbs and supplementation. What I've recently done, and that's just as my journey. I've been on this journey for probably about 6 years now in terms of my own, what I'm putting in my own toolkit, is getting a meditation and mindset coach, which has really helped to give me some tools in terms of meditation, in terms of breathing, helping with restorative practices that I'm actually able to pass on to my patients and help them to understand how we support the parasympathetic nervous system and dampen down the sympathetic nervous system. So those are some of the big rocks that I've been able to put into my little glass dish, you know, a glass holder is what you can say, and making sure that I shift that needle. Also working on gut health, looking at how I take care of the piping system. How are things going through the pipes? So there are a lot of different pieces that I've worked on, but some of the bigger ones are the ones that I just talked about.
I hear that. And I love that you're sharing a little bit about kind of what your journey is. And I love that you're also sharing that you're in it. You're still in this journey. You're going to be in this journey. And I think that's really important. So often I think we as women, I think, we've been at times sold the idea that maybe there's a one pill fix or one thing fix. And I always want to emphasize is that what I love so much about you, I love following you on Instagram because there's ownership there. This is a journey that we are owning. And I think there's something really beautiful about that journey. And once we decide, okay, we're owning this journey. And for me, I've had multiple ups and downs with my hormones, and I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis at 38. It's kind of when I started really feeling my perimenopausal type symptoms. And it was around that time that I decided that why not try to get pregnant in perimenopause and, and what all that looked like. And so I can speak into, I'm on thyroid medication for that. My thyroid had definitely been extensively damaged, and I worked on a lot of the root causes. So I'm in remission for Haji's, but still supporting that thyroid. And then when I was trying to get pregnant, lo and behold, very, very low progesterone levels. So bioidentical progesterone to help me get pregnant,
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to speak into that. And I agree. It's not for everyone. It depends on where you are in your journey when you're working with that practitioner and kind of figuring out what the real root cause of what's driving that.
Absolutely. I mean, like I go into working with my patients by saying, this is who I work with. I kind of delineate out the characteristics of my client, my ideal patient, so that so that we can upfront go, okay, this is going to be a fit or it's not going to be a fit. And so I delineate out, okay, these are the things that I use. These are the different tools I have in my toolkit. If you are open to all this, then yes, let's see how we can work together. And that way upfront, if you're like, oh, I'm never going to, be open to this, that, and the other, then it's quite all right, because I think that is the beauty of finding the right person too, to be able to help you. Working with someone that actually, is actually working in something called narrative medicine, where both of you come together and you exchange your life experiences and you're moving forward together for a common goal. And so this is where I feel I'm privileged to come with you at a certain point in your life. I mean, doctors, practitioners, healthcare providers, a lot of us are just privileged to be here with you when you're in a very vulnerable state of your health. And so we're supposed to be there to guide you, to give you the information that we've curated, because that's what we've done. We've curated a lot of information and be able to give it to you so that you know where it should fit into your life.
I love that. I love that so much. And I love that this is where you want to focus your efforts. I want to speak into destigmatizing perimenopause and menopause, because I think you could agree with me that a lot of practitioners, a lot of primary doctors aren't necessarily hormone experts. No. And I know that we go there hoping for an answer, hoping for something. And sometimes we walk away and we're just like, is anyone listening? Does anyone know what's going on with me? I just feel so misinformed, or I don't know what's going on. I feel like, especially with our culture, I hope through these conversations that we're going to shift things, but the value around women as we get older really shifts. And yes, and that we just kind of like, no, you're just getting older. I cannot tell you how many times I was talking to my mama on the phone, whose best friend, because my mom's been working with me for so long. So she's got, she's always got me in her back corner, but she has friends who, I had a friend of hers went to her doctor dealing with, night sweats, dealing with some brain fog, you just dealing with a lot of the symptoms that you and I see every single day. And he wrote her off. He's like, well, this is what happens when you're 57 years old, and good luck with that. And that was not what she was looking for, and my mom was so angry for her. She's like, Marisa, we have to do better. I'm like, you mean me? we as in me. And so, and this is the story that I hear so, so often. So being in the world as an OBGYN as well, like what are some of the things in which we can do to destigmatize what I consider to be a really gorgeous transition? If indeed we can reposition it, we can redefine it.
That's such a great question. What we have to do is continue to have these conversations that amplify it, because when we do that, when we shine the light on it, we actually take the boogeyman out of it. I was there as those providers. I was in that traditional role, and it does not provide us the opportunity to do a lot of outside reading, a lot of, being able to get the extra education, to be able to go outside of just what we're doing for that day. And you kind of have to be like, of a mindset where you're willing to kind of think outside the box, to be able to think a little bit outside of your traditional continuing medical education that's given to you on a regular basis. And I have to kind of stand up for my practitioners, my doctors that are in the trenches, because of the system that they're in does not allow that. So a lot of us have to come out of that system to be able to do what we do. And that takes a big step. That takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of, oh my gosh, thinking outside the box. And so once we have people like you, we have our patients, we have ladies that are saying, hey, this is not okay. And we keep raising the conversation, we keep amplifying it, we keep raising the volume on it, then we can continue to shine light on it. It's going to take us, basically going up to Capitol Hill and lobbying for the monies to be put into the research. Because when the WHI study came out and said, oh, those synthetic hormones were bad, we didn't take and do a good job of taking that information, breaking it down, and helping us understand what that meant. And now going forward, well, what does it mean for bioidenticals? What does it mean for women as they get older? How can we support and help them? Because now you have the wisdom of your years. You just need your body to cooperate so that your legacy is secure and that you can make an impact on the world and the community. And that is where the overall arching conversation comes from, is that we're going to have to do our little parts, which create these big ripples in the pond, that we can continue to raise the volume on this conversation and not have it in these hushed tones and whispers and, oh, she's going through the change. And you kind of have that whispered conversation, but say, no, this is not normal. I don't feel right. And so what are you all going to do about it?
I love that. And I think you're absolutely right. I'm so glad you spoke into that. I'm seeing more and more OBGYNs stepping into a more functional approach and leaving that primary practice, that because following that systematic approach, I know that the systematic approach isn't working for everybody. And I know you know it because you left it, and I just want to really just a moment celebrate that bravery and celebrate that deep knowing, one, that bravery because it wasn't serving you and your body. That is a very grueling schedule. And then number two, when you're looking at your patients and you're looking at yourself, thinking to yourself, there's got to be another way. And I want that for all of us. I want that for me and for all of my patients moving forward. I've had such an amazing conversations with medical doctors where they're just like, it came to a fork in the road where I was sick and I realized that what I had wasn't helping me. And I had to go out and find out what it was. And that's when I had to make a decision. And I ended up becoming a more functional approach doctor. But I recognize that it is the way that the systems and the protocols and the way that it all is built up. You just kind of have to follow the way it's built. But I'm so grateful for you just sharing that with us, because I want the thousands of women listening to this interview to say, okay, that makes so much sense as to what my experience has been. And that makes so much sense as to how I can navigate that moving forward. And there's a two-part piece there, because the other piece was that, it's a quiet conversation. It's a taboo conversation. Even I have a book coming out. It's a menopause book coming out literally next week. It took me 2 years to write this. I am so excited about it. And I have a couple interviews coming through with some magazines. And one of the questions from one of these interviews was, what are some of your symptoms that you've experienced experienced during perimenopause. And I felt like I got gut punched. I'm just going to be straight up because I hadn't been referred to a woman, and I refer to myself in perimenopause all the time, but someone being like, so how's it going in perimenopause for you? And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Excuse me.
Yes.
What did you just say to me?
I understand. The first time that happened to me too, I was like, oh, wait, well, no, I'm speaking to them. No, you're not. You're speaking to yourself.
And I was just had this moment and I was like, I get it. Like, I get why, for so long, menopause was this dirty word. And and even longer, you look back at the history of it, men had it as it was a condition. It was a condition. It was something that we treated. It was a treatable condition. So it's no wonder there's so much stigma around it. Even I was so surprised by my reaction.
You were just like, wait, what? No, not me. No, it's the other women.
It's the other women. And I own it, but it's like when someone sent it to me, I was like, well, let me just take a moment. So it's no wonder that anytime women are like, I get women all the time in like 56, 58 who are like, yeah, I don't know if I went through menopause or if I'm going through menopause. And I'm just like, no, girl, you've been through menopause. It happened. And it's because we want to tiptoe around it, and so I wanted to just speak into that too, that cultural destigmatization, not only what we're seeing in the doctor's office, but also just what we're encountering in the culture that we're experiencing.
Yes. Absolutely. I have nothing else to add to that part of the conversation. You've said it all. Absolutely.
Well, but I think, I think we get to own it. It took me a minute, but I was like, no, I'm owning this.
That is the truth. You do. When you own it, when you own that part of your story, it empowers you. And that's what I'm looking to do for my women, is that I want you to be able to say, I'm not crazy. This is me, this is what's happening, and this is what I'm doing to make sure that I can function every day and still show up and give you this badass whatever that's me. That I am showing up and you are getting the best of me because I have something to offer the world. And that is it. When you own it and you're able to then direct the narrative. You don't let your workplace, you don't let your family, you don't let the society dictate to how you're supposed to now act.
I love that. I have a question for all the women that come to you. I think a lot of us I think there's so much misconceptions. I know for me that I always thought that menopause was when we dealt with all of these really crazy symptoms. And that is not true. And not that they can't spill over. There is a little spillover. I know that there are some women who are like, I'm feeling that still, but it is actually in perimenopause. And so I'd love to know, Dr. LaKeischa, what are the average age of women reaching out to you? Are they typically in their 40s or do you find that they're in their 50s?
No, it's in the 40s. So my average woman is between around 45 to 55. What I tell women is that I love to I refer to it as a phase of life because you're on a spectrum. So perimenopause is like the beginning of it. And so menopause, the actual definition is just 12 consecutive months without a period. And then you have, some people call it postmenopausal, when you've actually completed that 12 months and you're done. And so what some women believe is that, if I have hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, I'm in menopause. And that is the definition of it. No, it's not, because not every woman's going to have those symptoms, have all three, have one or the other. You start having some of those symptoms and still have your period. And that's where the confusing thing is. It's like, why am I having these symptoms, but I still have a period? And that's where the doctors will tell you, those that are not well versed in the hormone space will say, oh, honey, then no, I don't know what's wrong with you. And there's nothing wrong with you, or it's all in your head. No, it's not. I'm not sleeping. I can't get good rest. I'm gaining weight. Oh, just eat less, exercise more. No, you cannot just say it that way, because the hormones are changing and your body is reacting to stressors in a different way. And so, the average woman that's coming to me, like I said, is usually about early 40s. I have some in their 30s that may have experienced some type of stressor. But for definition's sake, if you actually stop having your period for 12 consecutive months in your 30s, it's classified as premature ovarian failure. I mean, it's the same thing. thing, as basically you're probably experiencing all the same symptoms, but we just have these textbook definitions so that when practitioner to practitioner talks, we know what we're talking about. That's all.
And we're seeing that too.
Yeah.
We're seeing that too. We're seeing that women in their 20s and their 30s. And that's why I'm so excited for the functional perspective, because we do deserve to understand what these root causes are. Just like the testosterone and the thyroid and you talked about gut health, how much that is tied into so much of what's going on with us, how much the stressors are tied into what's going on with us. I've seen so many women looking at their Dutch tests where their cycle is what was 28 is now 26 days or 25 days. We're seeing a shortening of the cycle. We're seeing decreasing in progesterone levels across the board. I'm seeing tanked testosterone. And I know that ideally we're supposed to still see testosterone at a decent level into our 50s, but I don't recall ever seeing a lab where I've seen that be the case.
Well, let me put it this way. I tend to see it in women who may have had excess testosterone when they were in there.
Yes.
They were in their reproductive phase. So that's a whole nother conversation.
PCOS. Yeah, definitely. Another conversation for another day, for sure. I wanted to just speak into that too, because I just so often I think that there's been a lot of confusion. A lot of women are like, wait, am I in menopause? Like, I'm 45. What's going on? And no, those are symptoms of massive shifting hormones in perimenopause going into menopause. And I don't know how this was missed on so many of us for so long. Like I don't think my mom knew about perimenopause.
They did not have the language. They weren't taught it. It wasn't anything that was recognized. So they didn't have the verbiage for us. So this is something that's pretty new in terms of the last probably 15 years or so. 10 to 15 years where we're actually using this term perimenopause or premenopause. I think I remember it in residency starting to hear about, oh, maybe she's premenopausal. We're starting to have this terminology where it's right before menopause. And they were even saying it was just as short as probably 3 or 5 years. But now we're expanding that because we're seeing the symptoms and we're understanding them more. And that is where the conversations have to be expanded. But yes, my mother, my grandmother, they didn't have the verbiage to tell me that. I mean, my mother just would tell me, oh, your body's going to start changing and shifting. And, my mother was probably a little more open in her conversations to me than most mothers were, to the point where sometimes I'd be like, okay, Ma, that's too much information. But she would tell me about how when she had her hysterectomy and telling me as I was diagnosed with fibroids and actually had to have a myomectomy because one of my fibroids degenerated and caused me to have pain. She was like, look, if you have to have a hysterectomy because your fibroids get so bad, she was like, it's not going to impact who you are as a woman. Like those were the type of conversations she had with me was make sure that you understand that you still have the ability to feel feminine. You still have the ability to function as a woman. And she gave me the grace to say, hey, if this is for your health, because I had menorrhagia, very, very heavy periods to the point where I was anemic. I mean, it was horrible. And I did figure out a different way to be able to manage it where I didn't have to have a hysterectomy, but just having that conversation with her made me at ease to feel like, okay, it's not my fault. It's not something I did per se, but it could be something that could come up. And that's what I want to be able to have these conversations with women saying, look, this is something that can happen. This is something that may happen for you. Now, it's not just this may happen, but here are some things, some tools, here are some answers for you. And that's the completed conversation that we want to be able to have.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. I know I saw on your Instagram post that you were talking about estrogen dominance and how that plays a role into heavy periods and development of fibroids. And that 85% of us before we hit menopause have fibroids. Many of us won't know because there won't be symptomology for them. And then if there is, what can we do to navigate that?
Absolutely.
And so I love that those conversations are happening. I love that your mama was having those conversations with you. My mama was like, listen, I'm going through 30 pads in a day. or 30 tampons in a day. What do you have for me? And so, and so many women are feeling that way, and having some natural options on the table before the more invasive options on the table happen, I think are so, so critical. Yeah. And I know you're probably having a lot of those conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, oh my goodness, Dr. LaKeischa, where do we plug into you first? What would you love for us to do? Because I know so many women are like, I am dealing with all of that right now, and I can't find someone to help me. And I just love that this is really the area of focus that you're having. There's not enough women practitioners, doctors focusing specifically on that perimenopause to menopause transition and really knows it inside and out. And that's why I was so excited to ask you to come on to have this conversation with me. So where can we plug in? Where would be that first step for us, for you?
Oh, I hear so many women are like, well, I'm not sure. I don't know what's going on. So I say, hey, I have something for you. It's like, create your hormone blueprint by going to take my hormone quiz. So go to hormonequiz.co, that's it, and get your free quiz. Get that quiz, see where you are, what's going on. It kind of takes you through and you're like, oh yeah. And it helps you to see if some of the symptoms you're having, what's going on with you. And then I also have created a 7-day video mini course that helps to kind of start breaking down for you what's going on in that body. If you are like, look here, I am tired, but I'm wired, or I'm not sleeping, or I don't want to have sex anymore, what's really going on. So it breaks this down over 7 days. You go at your own pace, and that's just a small $49 fee. The hormone quiz is free. You can grab that anytime, but the 7-day mini course is just for $49 that you can grab over at hormonehottiesminicourse.com.
I love that name, by the way. It's so great. I love that reframing. And I will have both links, very obvious, inside of the show notes. And then Dr. LaKeischa, where can we find you? I know I keep mentioning, I see you on Instagram, girl.
You can find me on all social media platforms at Dr. LaKeischa MD. That's DrLakeisChamD. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm in Clubhouse, and I'm on Twitter at that handle everywhere.
Nice. I love it. Well, thank you so much again for not only doing the work that you do in the world, but for sharing your brilliance here on the show. I just so appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am so excited to have been here and be able to have this conversation. It has filled my soul. Thank you.
Me too.